Hello, everybody. This is Ian Williams from the Foreign Press Association, and we have a return guest today, Carey Gillam, who is, I could almost say, a toxic guest because she keeps talking about toxicity with, uh, she's been battling against the non-disclosure by chemical companies. Um, because, as far as I can tell, you're not a Luddite who opposes all forms of chemicals and innovation. It's simply the fact that chemical companies have not been telling people the truth or warning people what's on, and often asserting complete lies. So there's a preemption going through Congress this week, which is a sort of get out of jail or get out of bankruptcy card in advance for some of the chemical companies. Could you explain the background to that?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we've been covering this. A lot of, the big news outlets are following this story. It's been evolving over the past few years. Essentially, what happened this week, here in the first week of January, as I'm talking to you, is that Democrats, under the leadership of U.S. Rep. Shelley Pingree, working together with the Make America Healthy Again coalition of grassroots organizations, which is distinct from the White House Make America Healthy Again commission. But Pingree and these Maha moms were able to pressure enough Republicans to get on board and strip language from the 2026 appropriations bill that would have effectively helped Bayer and other pesticide companies reduce litigation. Shelley Pingree called it, an immunity shield, a pesticide immunity bill. And people around the country have really been following this, health and environmental advocates. They were successful in getting language, Bayer and its allies were successful in getting language into this appropriations bill last summer. There was a pretty bitter battle that played out, on Capitol Hill over the summer, specifically in a hearing in July. And the Republicans and the pesticide industry were prevailing. But Pingree told me, this week when I spoke to her, she said she just drew a line in the sand. She mobilized all of these MAHA members to, pound on congressmen, and they were able to get this language taken out. She said it's dead for now in appropriations. It's not going to come back. They have Republican leadership in agreement that they will not restore this language protecting pesticide companies. But they fully do expect the industry to be pushing it again in the new farm bill and in other legislative efforts at the federal level. They're also pushing these laws and language that would protect them from lawsuits in different states. They've gotten it passed in Georgia and North Dakota so far, and they have a whole lineup of different states for 2026 in which they're lobbying. The industry is spending millions and millions of dollars, TV, radio, billboard, lobbying, contributions to lawmakers, really trying to get these laws passed to make it harder for consumers to sue them if they believe that they've been injured through exposure to pesticides.
So, to what extent is this? It's a bit early to call it a victory, but a sort of a local victory in the sense, yes, a big, not so much a step forward as not a step backwards, which is
Right.
what we're anticipating more often nowadays. But to what extent is this a reflection of the contradictions between Robert Kennedy's eccentricities with healthy food, what he's saying, and what the lobbyists have got the Republicans saying? Because some of them must be confused. They're being asked to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. This is such an interesting thing to watch, this Make America Healthy Again movement, and this marriage of, Bobby Kennedy, which, is this famous, well-known Democrat, environmental lawyer, health advocate, children's health defense advocate, that sort of thing, coming within the sphere of MAGA and the Trump administration and all of the paradoxical, things that come with that. Because what you see in the Trump administration, of course, is what you're alluding to, is a rollback of so many regulatory protections for public health and a real friendliness to the chemical industry, and other big industries, oil and gas, et cetera. But you have this Kennedy, who's been named Health and Human Services Secretary by Trump, trying to keep his followers happy and trying to pursue his own agenda, which he has said is to make Americans healthy, to reduce chronic disease, to protect children who are, dealing with multiple chronic diseases in our country and obesity and all that sort of thing, mental health challenges. And they keep running into each other. And this is a pretty good example of that. We could talk about the Make America Healthy Again Commission, which the White House set up, put together a draft report on how to go about making Americans healthier again last spring. And it specifically called out pesticides, glyphosate, which is used in Roundup, which is what Bayer is being sued over, and talked about how bad it was, and talked about a different atrazine, which is a chemical weed killer sold by Syngenta, in which consumers are also suing. Talked about a lack of, good regulatory rigor from the EPA. And then you saw over the summer how the industry lobbied the White House, went to all of these industry insiders have been appointed to EPA, and were able to get all that language stripped out of this Make America Healthy Again Commission report and really have it watered down. So you keep seeing over and over this push pull, one step forward, two steps back, where something happens that health advocates cheer, and then something else happens that the pesticide industry is happy about. It's a real battle going on, and it's really fascinating to watch and report on.
Well, catching up on your recent publications, the New Lead is the site, by the way. We'll put up a link later. Um, One of the glaring contradictions, these people, in the words of Rabbie Burns, the Scots poet, they do not, God did not give them the giftie to see themselves as others see them. They- So one of the things that surprised me was that the EPA had banned some weed killers on golf courses, but were allowing it for massive agriculture. I mean, how does anyone even try to justify that? I know one person who these healthy might be trying to protect who seems to have a predilection for golf.
That's a good point. I mean, I think it comes down to money, right? Far more weed killer is sold and used, and profit margins, and all of that on the agricultural land. I mean, that's the last stand for the pesticide industry. If they would lose the agricultural market for these weed killers and insecticides and all, it would just be a death blow to them. So, but you are seeing movement. It's widely expected that we will see some limits put on glyphosate, for instance. We've talked about that before. It's the most widely used weed killing chemical agent in the world. It's part of Roundup and numerous other branded herbicides, widely used in agriculture and industrial, and a whole array of uses around the world. But one tiny little step that the activists believe they are going to get the EPA to agree to is to ban it from desiccation uses in agriculture, which is when you spray it directly over mature crops to dry them out for harvest. And that practice has left these chemical residues in wheat and oats and lentils, and a whole array of things that, so when you feed baby oatmeal to your kid, they're getting glyphosate in their baby food. So that's a practice that
Eat up all them things are good for you. That's what my mother
right.
used to say.
Yeah. But the word is that the EPA is going to cave in on that perhaps, and go ahead and ban that practice. So, we will see, but that would obviously not change the fact that it would still be
It might be
usable.
reversed by an executive order, though. I mean,
Yeah.
processes doesn't seem the right word for regulation at the moment.
Right.
It's whatever
Right.
passing whim passes through the White House. But part of this, didn't you? One of the things you highlighted recently was that there was a scientific study that the was, let us say, produced under the influence of the chemical companies that had to be withdrawn. Can you explain about that?
Yeah. And oh my gosh, like, let's see, what is it now? 25 years later, 26 years later. Yeah, the journal that had published this, we refer to it as the William Crozen Monroe paper. It was published in the year 2000, and it was considered a foundational piece of research, published research proving essentially the safety of glyphosate. Um, no cancer concerns, no reproductive concerns, no issues on the endocrine system. It was safe, 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 safe. And this scientific study was given to all of the regulatory bodies by Monsanto and has been used, for years as its defense. It purportedly was written by three independent scientists. Um, what we found and what I've been reporting on for well more than a decade and included in my books and have written over and over and over again is that internal Monsanto documents show very clearly it was not an independent paper. Monsanto crafted the paper, designed it, wrote it, edited it, put it together, promoted it, and celebrated internally when it was finished and talked about how much work their scientists had put into this independent paper, how it was 3 long years of hard work by teams of Monsanto scientists to put this independent paper together to be its global defense. Very clearly was not independent in any way, shape, or form.
Sounds
Um,
as though he should have won the Nobel Prize for Literature for long form fiction.
right. But it took 25 years. They had a celebratory little party and they got all their scientists polo shirts to celebrate all the great work they did in putting together this paper. That's not an independent paper.
There's a
Um,
complete absence of self-awareness here, isn't there? That
yeah.
just
But the journal editor finally, I guess catching up on his reading, realized the extent of the fraud and declared that the paper had to be retracted. This happened in late November, early
yes,
December-ish.
that's what I saw. Yeah, that's so.
Mhm.
So, I mean, th this is part of a pattern, isn't it? The research, the it's with the pharmaceutical industry as well. That you have paid for research masquerading as objective research. And it's one thing, that's why we insist in scientific papers that any interest be declared, so that you can bear this in mind. And similarly, in the past, when they were dealing with the food pyramid, the experts on the panels were supposed to declare any interests, like if the Texas Beef Foundation was funding the research or had members on there. So
Right.
this is a stunning breach. It attacks science as we know it.
Yeah, for sure. And it is emblematic of a bigger problem. Monsanto was by no means, the only bad actor, or the only perpetrator of, ghost-written scientific studies. This study, actually, they referred to it as ghost-written in their own internal emails. Remember
Wow.
when we ghost wrote that William Crozen Monroe paper? That was an email from 2015 when they were getting ready to ghost write another scientific paper and said, recall when we ghost wrote this other one. So
All of
ghostwriting,
these academics are still in post, though.
were the academics what?
Were the academics involved still in post?
The yes, they were involved. It looks like they were involved. It looks like they were paid for their involvement.
But are they still, what I mean is they are still considered respected members of the academic community?
Two of the three are dead, and the other one is, I don't even know the status of him. He's been unreachable.
Suppose it adds a new dimension to Ghost Ridden then.
Yeah,
It's sorry,
correct.
it's a
So
macabre quip, but no, because they sort of get them going in. They doctor the papers, and then of course they doctor the output. So their studies get a hell of a lot of publicity and because most of us don't read the sort of annals of the annals of agricultural chemistry research or whatever. It's
right,
it takes some publicity to push it out there, and they've got the publicity, so they then
exactly.
push it out, and people accept. A lot of journalists are quite lazy about this. They don't, the first thing we should do, as you do, is to check who any signs for is it paid for? Does it
Scroll to the
contradict
bottom.
previous reports? It's
Immediately, you scroll to the bottom. You look at author affiliation and you scroll to the bottom and you try to determine as best you can, the authenticity, the validity of the independence. You get in contact with the authors if you can. Yeah,
if
I mean,
you're hard pressed, you just top and tail the press release and publish it as news under your byline. Oh, no, I'm not saying you, but one
You hope
does.
not to, right? You hope not to. I mean, I think you mentioned the dietary guidelines, which were released earlier, well, yesterday, on January 7th. Um, and conflicts of interest. I always, I always, I guess I try to be as fair-minded about that as I can. It makes sense that you want people who have experience, who are experts and have experience in different industries to weigh in on important policy matters and to sit on advisory committees, to our different government agencies, and to weigh in. They wouldn't be an expert, if they weren't involved in the industry. And so they should have a voice, and I think they should have a role, but it should be disclosed and it should be transparent, and that should be taken into account, right? That there are various vested interests, and I think that there should be an array of these voices. And it shouldn't be, of course, just from one industry, and it shouldn't just be from public health advocates or just environmental health advocates, because all of these different voices and positions and influences have to be considered in making effective public policy. So I'm not particularly worked up, I guess, about, an industry person or individual or expert being involved in an advisory group, as long as we know who they are and we know what money might be involved, and and the transparency is sort of the problem that we've had in Washington for so long, right? I mean, with Trump, I don't know, this is just kind of an off the shoulder kind of thing. Like, he doesn't seem to be so concerned about hiding things as maybe past administrations, right?
Shameless. But
He just he just comes right out there and says what he's doing, and it's oftentimes quite appalling and outrageous. And
well,
but
one notices. I mean, we have to allow for the role of eccentricity in these politics because
oh,
Bobby
yeah,
Kennedy is, I don't think he's a creature of lobbyists. He's a creature of whims and fantasies, of course. And, a lot of people have commented that there's a lot of sense in what the recently released food pyramid.
of course, very
Oh,
definitely.
stop clock is right once or twice a day. And he seems to have done it with this one. But luckily, vaccines weren't included in this food pyramid. We
Right.
had Marianne Nestle on a few years ago. She was involved in the actual committee on the food pyramid, and she described the pressures from the various, the
Right.
cattle ranch industry and the others to alter things, which weren't scientific. They were basically just bullying and saying, you can't do this. And in
Right.
Texas, I think you can actually be sued for libel if you suggest that beef isn't good for you.
Yeah, Oprah found that out, right? Remember
Yeah.
that?
I mean, so there's lots. It's as you said, it's transparency is the big issue here. But
Mhm.
is there any sort of kickback? I mean, people get away with it. Politicians get away with it. And then what can we do to make sure that journalists are aware of these? Is there a counter lobby to say, wait, ring some alarm bells about this paper? Or because, in journalism, the first it's called the first draft of history. But
Mm,
who gets the first draft in first determines what the history is quite often. You know,
right.
I've noticed this myself. If you get your version in first, it's it actually determines it. And if a massive PR campaign on behalf of the chemical companies gets that report in front of everyone, then unless there's a scandal in the retraction, most people it sticks. That paraquat is good for you, and you should give 2 spoonfuls a day for babies for their health or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what I've seen over my 20, 30 years now of reporting on this industry, and just reporting in general, it seems that there is increased awareness, acceptance, public knowledge, public promotion of the ideas that corporations lie, corporations, you know, spend a lot of money trying to change the narrative, and information about front groups is out there now. And I think people have become maybe more cynical, so not well, not what we want, I guess, but maybe um, more aware of the need for multiple sourcing and to not just believe what they read. I hope. Of course, you have the whole counter culture idea with people is just following social media and going down the rabbit hole. But UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, recently set up the Center to End Corporate Harm, which is specifically aimed at kind of raising awareness and addressing these issues of ghostwriting and corporate manipulation of lawmakers and of research and of public opinion and um, so and there are a lot of different groups and there are authors. I guess I'm hopeful that we're kind of
I wish I shared your optimism because as far as I can see, we have
it's a little optimism, very
yeah,
little.
I know I'm a pest optimist. I always expect the worst, but I'm very grateful when good comes along. But we have the has the MAGA crowd has now turned the sort of progressive and the campaigning ideal on itself is that they will now say that any refutations and rebuttals produced by your group, for example, are products of the woke lobby to be dismissed. So they've managed to introduce a pervasive skepticism, which allows people to pick and choose which to believe without looking at much in the way of objective reality.
Right, right. And you do have so much in terms of these different, I don't even know what to call it, different platforms, social media platforms, influencer platforms, which you can, there's a whole menu of ranging, from the far right to far left and everything in between and just completely off the rails down the rabbit holes. And you can just dive into one of those and reinforce whatever beliefs I guess you have.
Rabbit holes are us.
Without any objective truth interfering. Um,
So, what should we look for if we see a scientific study on the joys of paraquat and glyphosate and so on? And
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm not an expert. I've just been doing it for a long time, but
that makes you an
you
expert. A
you
lot of
don't want to
people.
read just one study. You want to look for more. You want to look at who the authors are and their affiliations. You want to understand the rigor of the journal. Is this a well-respected journal? Who are the editors of the journal? Are the papers, of course, are they peer reviewed? What is the peer review process that they go through? Um, there's a lot of different ways to try to ascertain um, the rigor of research that you're looking at. Um, and I also don't think that we need to. I'm sorry, I have a dog that's growling. Still growl. Um, I also think we need to remember that scientific research and research papers that are published are not necessarily meant to be the be all end all. Here is the absolute truth forever and ever. Uh, Now in the case of Monsanto and glyphosate and the ghostwritten papers, they very much intended for that to be in that way. But the papers that truly are trying to be authentic and bring authentic truth to our world as we try to understand all these different factors around us is always just a quest, right? And typically you'll see at the end, we don't, I'm paraphrasing here, but they're saying, more research is needed to fully understand the implications of these findings. Um,
So no one paper has the whole truth. It's a
yeah,
sort
it's
of
an ongoing
pointillist picture
quest,
where you
right?
have to see all the dots from a bit of perspective and see that if
Exactly.
the bulk of papers are angling in one direction, then it
Right.
suggests that this is the way to go.
Right, but it's always a quest for better understanding, and we're just you're seeing it with microplastics. We're seeing more and more research now about microplastics and how they enter the human body and the different organs that they have been found present in, and trying to understand, well, how does that impact our health, and what can we do about it? And it's knowledge changes and grows and evolves, and I think we have to be open to understanding that when we're looking at the different things that come out in science.
It's always worrying. I mean, I interviewed was it Dr. Professor Doll in Britain, who was one of the people who first made the connections for lung cancer and
Mm.
smoking. And he was reviled as an outsider for a long time, like like the guy who said that doctors should wash their hands before between dissecting corpses and give helping women give birth. he was regarded as a complete outlier for a long time. So we don't always have to go along with the full consensus. But that type of skepticism can have repercussions on if it's magnified. Are there any other scandals, not scandals, let's say, any other controversies coming up? Any issues that people should be looking out for in terms of the the weed killer and their effects on well the paper you've just had you featured a podcast I believe of Parkinson's
Hmm. Right.
and
Yeah, I mean, I think on the very macro level, um, things that people should, journalists and just general audience readers, consumers, there's a lot happening in Washington, as we just talked about earlier with this push-pull, like what are we doing to protect our public health and our environment? And you have forces within this administration that are working against each other. Some that are pushing for more public health protections, and others, and apparently more powerful forces that are pushing for more protections for the industries that threaten our public health. Um, so you're seeing rollbacks of protections for air quality and water quality and pesticide industry issues. And so that's something that's really important, I think, for journalists in particular to keep an eye on and to be reporting in depth on and keep an eye, watch that. For me, particularly, I'm very interested in a very perhaps narrow, but it does impact a lot of people, the subject of Parkinson's disease and a chemical called paraquat that has been linked to Parkinson's disease and found in many scientific studies to be a causal factor, exposure to be a causal factor for Parkinson's. And of course, Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurological disease in the world. It's impacting, just more and more people every day. It is a terrible, awful, debilitating brain disease that eventually leads, to death as the person loses their neurological functions. So the very first trial, there are many thousand people who have sued Syngenta, a Chinese-owned company, saying that they have failed to warn their users of this link to Parkinson's disease. And the very first trial in that case is slated to take place January 26th in Philadelphia. So I'm looking forward to covering that
I
if
was
it
about to
actually
say,
takes
will the
off.
trial take place or
Syngenta has so far settled every single trial, every single case that has been set for trial. And so we will see if this one actually takes
that
off.
seems a common corporate strategy. You settle and then it becomes just a part of the cost of doing business that you can claim against your taxes.
I was fortunate enough to get my hands on, I don't even know how many thousands of pages of internal Syngenta documents. And I've reported on those in The Guardian and in the New Lead. And they do show that the company was well aware back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, growing awareness of a connection to uh, brain, brain harm and then Parkinson's specifically, and that there was discussions about, back in the 1980s, there were discussions about, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You we need to start preparing for litigation. We need to figure out how to, defend ourselves and defend our product. This could be really bad for us. But they never warned consumers about that. So
So that they warn the lawyers, but not consumers.
brought in the lawyers, connected the lawyers to their scientists in an effort to get all their internal scientific work to be considered attorney-client privilege. That didn't really work out for them. One of their own scientists did a study internally to see if she could duplicate all these worrisome findings that were being done by independent scientists about paraquat getting into the brain and causing these changes in the brain that lead to Parkinson's. And she indeed duplicated that effort, and they buried that study, never told the EPA about it until they were forced to through litigation.
Well,
And
look, that's before
just
we go. That was the other question I wanted to bring up. To what extent, I mean, there are hardcore within this administration that want government to just butt out of everything apart from handing over checks to corporations. And to what extent has the regulatory apparatus, the EPA and the others, been gutted below the hole below the waterline by Elon Musk and Doge, and letting a bunch of pimply adolescents tear through the federal government, ripping holes in it.
Yeah, I mean, the EPA, it's an interesting thing to watch that as well. We've seen since Trump took office, we've seen several chemical industry leaders come into the EPA and take high-level positions in the regulatory structure of the EPA. So on the one end, you've seen them kicking out a lot of scientists and researchers, and the Office of Research and Development at the EPA has been gutted. But in terms of leadership, they've loaded it up with chemical industry players to pursue chemical industry agendas. Um, but you but you also have, Lee Zeldin, who's the administrator of the EPA, who seems very aware of the MAHA movement and the strength of these coalitions out in grassroots America that have kind of had it, right, with EPA corruption and EPA ignoring consumer
We
concerns.
might end up rooting for Bobby Kennedy after all.
And so, they started a petition drive to oust Lee Zeldin from the EPA, and he responded by going to one of the MAHA meetings and calling them into the EPA, and he's promising them he's gonna, at least do some of their bidding. We have yet to see if that's going to be the case,
When
but
did they ban the weed killer on the golf courses? Was that under this administration or earlier?
I think that was under Biden. I'd have to
Okay.
go back
And
and
he
check
doesn't
on.
even play golf as far as I know.
But
So
yeah, I don't know. It's all it's all just really, really interesting to watch. It's kind of like a bad movie unfolding that we don't know the ending yet, right?
I think that's a great note to finish on. Bad movie ending, fini,
Bad
as they
movie.
say. The end. Well, thanks very much, and we do let us know about future developments, and we will let our members know, and hope that the Foreign Press Association and other journalists who are in contact with us look at just the facts, man, and not the and not the not the handouts.
Right. It gets harder and harder, but
I know, I know.
stick to the
I've
truth. Yeah.
been there. I've spent a lifetime toiling uphill, like
Well,
swimming
thanks so
upstream
much.
against molasses, I tell people.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to see you. Good
You
to see you
too.
looking healthy as well.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Alrighty. Bye.